Hey guys, welcome to Purposes Trade. And today I want to talk about an important topic that is basically regarding loneliness and trust issues and the rigidness in our societies. So I'll talk about each of them different independently, and then I'll try to link each of them together, and I'll try to explain why the current method of tackling these issues, especially in Western world, doesn't work. And so, like, first thing, loneliness is not an issue you'll come across in communities where people look out for each other. You know, in the Western world, the reason loneliness is such a big deal in Western world is because the Western world has this framework of individualism. Everyone is trying to pursue their own life, own career. It's all me, 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 me. Self-improvement, self this, self that. Right. And that's where actually loneliness comes from. Loneliness comes from being obsessed with yourself. And no one's saying you shouldn't think about yourself, and you shouldn't try to improve yourself, but you need to have a community around you that you can talk to and trust and be flexible around. And if that doesn't exist, then these mental health issues, loneliness issues, rigidness, all these will basically just exacerbate and amplify. And that's what's happening in the Western world. I mean, recently I saw this, it was in Canada. So this MP, she was proposing a bill in the Canadian Parliament. And bill was basically that to stop people from harassing someone else through online means and all that, and why that's a big deal, how it's becoming more and more prevalent in Canadian society. Now, my question is, when you make that bill and submit it to parliament, let's say it gets approved. Let's say someone does do that kind of harassment, constantly texting someone, calling someone, even when they don't want to, even when the other person doesn't want to respond. Okay, then you go to a judge, you get a restraining order, an online restraining order. How do you enforce that? How do you enforce an online restraining order? Like, think about it. Like um, the person has to get that restraining order online through an email or something. And that restraining order basically has to be, I guess, accepted online or seen by the person's email. And even then, what if the person constantly does that? And then you're gonna have to locate the person. How do you locate the person? You have to get his personal IP address online. You're basically gonna bring the government more and more into people's personal lives in order to protect people from a little bit of harassment or whatever it might be. So the intention behind all these laws, I think her name was Michelle Garnier or something. I mean, look, it sounds a very nice law. You know, oh, I'm trying to protect people who are harassed by their exes and all that. The law in the, on the surface, it sounds a very nice law. But if you read the details of the law, the only way you can enforce the law is by government gathering more personal details about the person online and the physical location and all that, and basically getting rid of more privacy of people, of Canadians in the process. That's how you enforce the law. And on top of that, think about the mental health of a person that you told to stop harassing someone else, to stop calling, texting, or whatever, but that person keeps doing that. Do you think putting that person in prison is the solution? I mean, clearly he or she is not mentally stable or is going through a loneliness epidemic or something, loneliness phase. Clearly something's not right. That's pretty obvious. And so on top of that, now you're gonna penalize him and send him in prison or what? And get his personal info? Like, it's just ridiculous. The- More intervention by the government in people's private lives is never ever the solution. It never was. And all these laws on the surface, they sound pretty nice. They sound pretty, trying to protect the victim. But in reality, they're just out to get more personal details. They're just trying to get the government more and more involved in your personal life. That's the reality of the law. And now you come to the question of why loneliness exists. Okay. When you live in a society where you have hate crime, okay, you can't say something that might come across as hateful to another group of people. You have laws against, like, you have especially you have so many laws on the book that are basically restricting the natural way a person should behave. That it basically it's a pressure cooker, and when the pressure is released, it comes out in a very bad way. If you think about it, that's basically the problem. The problem with loneliness is people not being able to talk to other people in their community in a free and fair and relaxed manner because they'll be labeled this, that, there's laws against this, you know. So when you basically have to shut your mouth, even when you're around people, you'll feel lonely, right? Because you don't want to say this, oh, what that person might think this. You don't want to say that. And especially in Western countries, I mean, USA is still okay. I mean, it's still halfway there. But countries like Canada, UK, European Union, it's insane what's going on there. I know people who can't speak their minds with their own wives, with their own kids, because there are laws on the books against saying certain things to your wives and kids. So of course you're lonely. Like, what's gonna happen, right? You're gonna be lonely when you can't engage with the community in a relaxed and speaking your mind manner. That you're gonna end up lonely even when you're around people. That's just how it is. Okay. And I know this firsthand. Look, lived in Canada. I've experienced loneliness. Look. I under it. This is something you don't see on the surface if you haven't lived there. But if you're someone who lived in Canada or someone who lives in UK or European Union, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, you can be around people, and like a point is reached to where it's better to be physically alone than to be alone among people. Because when you're physically alone, at least you can say all random shit to yourself, and when you're alone mentally but around people physically, at least you have to control your mental frame of thought, the thought process, because you don't want to say something that might come across as hate crime, this, that. You don't want to get into trouble, and especially Western countries, people are like bunch of pussies, in my opinion, and they're basically neutered. Okay, you get a stray dog, you put an injection in him, and he stops barking. Yeah, Western countries, people are basically they've been neutered to a point. Though a group of men and will hang around and they've known each other for 10 years, 15, 20 years, and they'll still be careful what to say among each other, okay? Because they don't trust each other. Because not only are there laws in the book, they also have serious trust issues from God knows where, from maybe their childhood and whatever. And like this is another thing, man. Like this is something you also don't see on the surface. People in Western countries, the newer with every generation, they're coming from more and more broken families. And I don't feel happy to say this, but I've seen this firsthand. Like my dad lived abroad, and he told me, I've seen people from his generation who grew up in Western countries. I've seen millennials and then my generations and all that. And the only trend I've noticed is that with every generation, more and more people are, they're emotionally broken. They come from broken families. Maybe the parents were together, but they used to fight a lot of infighting and all that. The parents separated, came back, all sorts of, they don't come, most of them don't come from stable home. And why will you come from stable home? When the husband is afraid to what to say to the wife because there's a hate crime law, a misogynist law on the books, a domestic abuse law, you know, the more you get the government involved in your private lives, you're gonna end up with people coming from broken homes. You're gonna end up with people more lonely. You're gonna end up with people more rigid. And in those kind of scenarios, because we're human beings at the end of the day, we are not dogs, we are not robots either. Because we are human beings, when you put a human being in that kind of pressure cooker, the pressure keeps building and then it bursts out in a very uncontrolled and unintentional way, in a very bad way. And that's basically where all this harassment and all this comes from, in my opinion. Okay, someone who has a normal community around him, a bunch of people that he can speak freely his mind to, will not go around harassing people, harassing their ex and all that. Okay, when you have a community, you can't trust your wife, you can't trust your kids. There's laws against this on the book, against saying this to your wife, saying this to your kid, saying this to your friends, to your colleagues, to your exes. There's so many laws on the book. It's you sh- Getting government involved in your personal life is never ever the solution. Okay, that's the fundamental thing about you have to understand. The more you get your government involved, the more you'll have these problems. And well, yeah, that's where loneliness comes from, and loneliness leads to a lot of rigidness, not being flexible in the way you behave, think, because you're overthinking everything, because you're alone with your own thoughts most of the time. And that's where also trust issues come from. If you are around people, you're gonna trust people. Okay? If you're around dogs for a long time, you're gonna trust dogs. It's really that simple. Okay, if you're around a bunch of if you have never met a white person in your life as an Asian, you'll not trust white people. But if you grew up around white people, you'll trust white people. If you're around people and if you can communicate freely and be yourself around a bunch of people, you're gonna trust people in general. So this trust issues comes from this loneliness, this rigidness, and this overthinking. And look, man, that doesn't mean you're gonna get everything right. Okay, you can be as flexible as you want, not have a political filter when you think, or think your mind. And the thing is, you'll still, you'll still make mistakes, but getting the government involved and penalizing you for these simple mistakes, I feel like that's an escalation, and that will just push people more and more to this loneliness pandemic, this rigidness pandemic, this pandemic of trust issues. It will not get better by getting the government involved. Because this is the thing people don't understand about the government. The government is a faceless machine. Okay, when you think about the government, you think, oh, it's a bunch of people who understand my problems. Not really. It's a machine. Okay, you go to the government. Oh, this person is harassing me. He's my ex. Okay, cool. The government will get a restraining order. If he doesn't listen, he'll go to jail. 10 days later, you might change your mind. You might decide, oh no, I feel bad for sending my ex to jail. Then you go to the government. The government doesn't care. I'm sorry, he broke the law. He's going to jail. But you could tell the government, yeah, but I complained about him. Now I'm withdrawing my complaint. The government will be like, that's not how it works. So the moment you get your government involved in your private lives, you cannot get them out of your private lives. Just remember that. Okay? It's not like, oh, I wanted to get the government involved for this period of time in my private life. It doesn't work like that. The moment they get involved in your private lives, they're in it forever. And you'll be labeled as the person who gets the government involved in their personal lives. I'm not saying if there's a heinous crime going on, you shouldn't report, but you have to be realistic. The government is a faceless machine. When you get the government involved in your private life, not only will you cannot get them out of your private life, you will be labeled by other people as someone who gets the government involved in their private lives, and other people will stop associating with you. So you're basically you're basically attracting the things that you're trying to push away. You're trying to attract better people in your lives, but those better people will not come when when they hear that you got the government involved in your personal private life because of a past issue. Uh, you have to, unless they're stupid. I mean, look, if I'm dating a girl and she tells me that, my ex was this and that, and I complained about him and all that, I'll be like, okay, so what happened? Oh, he went to jail and all that. I'll stop seeing her. because it doesn't matter if she was at fault or not. She got the government involved in her personal lives, and old habits die hard. You know, this is what people don't understand. That doesn't mean she's a bad person. It's just if someone got the government involved in their personal lives for a petty thing as harassment that was then escalated to the point where her ex was sent to jail, I don't want to be involved with that person. It's really that simple. So she might play the victim, maybe she wasn't at fault, but she was naive and stupid enough to get the government involved in her private life. Okay? And that's never the solution. You'll always be labeled as someone who basically can't resolve their own issues, right? Without the government's help. And yeah, the only way to get out of this, especially in Eastern countries, in Global South, in Middle East, you'll not see this problem of loneliness. This problem only exists in Western countries because the idea of community, the idea of being around people, and not being penalized for what you say, what you think, and your petty mistakes not getting escalated to the point where you get sent to prison for very small mistakes, especially when you're going through bad times in your life. These kind of problems don't exist in Asian countries, in Africa, in Middle East. It's only in Western countries that they're basically trying to find ways to get the government more and more involved. And the old saying that divide and conquer, that's absolutely true. That's exactly what they're trying to do. Self improvement, self this, self that. Divide the people into individuals so you can control them as a government. And that's basically what the Western governments are trying to do. So I would say don't buy into this BS. Don't buy into all these MPs trying to propose these bills to, stop harassment online. The only result of this, and mark my word, will be more loneliness, more rigidness, more mental health issues, more trust issues, and less people speaking their minds online and in person. And this will all keep boiling up and piling up one after another, and it will burst open in a very ugly manner. Mark my words, that's exactly how this will end. Okay, so yeah, this is basically what I want to talk about in this video. If you guys like it, feel free to subscribe. I'm an ex-energy trader. I'm looking to educate the world on global finance, geopolitics, and just, these cultural issues that are existing in the world, especially in the Western world, right? And so, yeah, if you like this video, feel free to subscribe. I'll see you guys in another video. Until then, peace.